Welcome back to the Explainer Focus Learners. Today, we're unpacking something absolutely fascinating, a highly passionate piece of spiritual literature written back in 2005 by an author named Xu Feng. It's called Responding to the Revelation, Finding the Way Out. Now, whether you look at a text like this as a religious doctrine, a philosophical allegory, or maybe even a dire apocalyptic warning, the way it's built, its architecture and rhetorical strategies is just incredibly compelling. Our goal today? Not to validate or debunk any spiritual claims for sure, but to neutrally break down the nuts and bolts of this text. We're going to see exactly how apocalyptic warnings have been used throughout history to basically shake readers awake, and how this author constructs their argument to guide us through an intricate allegorical maze. Let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. The author definitely doesn't waste any time easing us in. Right out of the gate, we're hit with this incredibly vivid, urgent imagery. A lightning bolt streaks across the expansive sky, accompanied by distant rolling thunder, foretelling an impending storm. By kicking things off at this massive sensory overload, the author puts us on high alert immediately. Obviously, this isn't just a weather report, right? It's a heavy metaphor for an impending spiritual or cosmic crisis. The whole setup is designed to make you feel like the clock is ticking, and time is literally running out. And almost immediately after establishing that heavy sense of environmental dread, the text suddenly pivots. It looks right at us and asks, "Humans, how much do you understand the mysteries of the universe?" This is such a classic, highly effective rhetorical move in spiritual and philosophical writing. By directly challenging our worldview and our spiritual awareness, the author is basically trying to strip away our everyday arrogance. The idea here is that if you, the reader, can step back and admit, okay, yeah, I don't fully understand the universe, then theoretically, you're going to be way more open to the revelation this text is about to drop on you. So that brings us to part 1, warnings of an impending storm, and specifically the problem of human ignorance. To really hammer home this core problem of human ignorance and willful blindness, the author leans on a highly charged, universally recognized metaphor, the tragic collapse of the World Trade Center on September 11th. The text sets up this hypothetical scenario. Think about it. If someone had warned the people inside that this incredibly sturdy, world-class building was about to just abruptly collapse, what would the response have been? The author argues it would be sheer disbelief. People would say, "Nonsense! How could such a solid building collapse?" The text then draws this direct, stark parallel to spiritual warnings. It argues that when a divine messenger actually arrives, even if they're kneeling in pure humility to warn of danger, people's knee-jerk reaction is to mock, ridicule, and scorn them. So it's using this horrific earthly tragedy to highlight what it views as an equally devastating spiritual tragedy: our human habit of ignoring imminent danger just because we place too much faith in physical permanence. The text also specifically mentions that a messenger of the greatest creator has arrived to perform what it calls a divine harvest. Let's break that down neutrally, based strictly on the source material. This whole idea of harvesting the crops is basically an allegory for spiritual judgment and salvation. You'll actually see this motif popping up constantly in apocalyptic literature, this concept of a final, grand gathering, where those who are spiritually prepared get separated from those who aren't. According to the author's claims, divine care and love have been clearly laid out for us, but humanity just stubbornly keeps choosing to focus on all the wrong things. Moving on to part 2, the pirate's useless wealth. This acts as a really potent metaphor for materialism. Shifting gears from those sweeping cosmic declarations into more of an intimate, storytelling rhythm, the author poses this incredibly stark, binary question to us before launching into a parable. Do you desire wealth or life? And by the way, notice the capitalization of life in that translation. It's totally intentional. The author's framing this as the ultimate choice between your status, your property, your earthly reputation, and your absolute spiritual survival. It sets up this rigid, totally uncompromising duality between the material world and the spiritual one. And this brilliantly illustrates that duality through the story of a notorious pirate. Imagine this pirate, who spent a lifetime plundering countless treasures, finally getting caught and dragged before a judge. Predictably, he tries to use his transactional worldview to literally buy his way out. He offers a third, and then all of his wealth, basically trying to bribe cosmic justice. He pleads with the judge, "People die for wealth. Don't people love wealth?" He's treating survival as just another commodity. But the judge in this story, he represents absolute, unbending justice. The verdict is swift and brutal. Your wealth wasn't rightfully earned. It was plundered. The law is not negotiable.
The real climax of this earthly legal drama is the pirate's ultimate, tearful realization. He laments, "Had I known that wealth couldn't spare my life, why did I strive so ardently to amass it?" The author's logic here is razor sharp. Think about it. If human laws aren't just child's play, and if you literally cannot bargain with an earthly judge using material wealth, how on earth could you possibly expect to bargain with the cosmic laws of the greatest creator? The whole parable is engineered to make you feel this acute, sinking sense of regret for prioritizing material wealth before it's too late. Which leads us into part 3, a critique of the East, the decline of spiritual integrity. From that general parable about universal human greed, the text takes a sudden, really sharp turn. It dives into a highly specific critique of what the author calls the Eastern land. Let's trace the timeline they construct here, because it really builds a narrative of historical decline and future urgency. Starting in the ancient era, the text describes the East as vast and abundant, but tragically plagued by excessive greed, falsehoods, and cruelty. And it's this exact state of affairs, the text claims, that prompted the arrival of the Tripitaka, the Buddhist scriptures, to save all beings. But then, moving into the modern era, the author argues that the East has just completely ignored these scriptures. The land is now described as dense, totally scamped on resources, where people actively despise laws and hold absolutely no belief in gods. All of this builds up to a super stark warning for the future era, an explicit threat of divine punishment if the population just keeps procrastinating and stubbornly stays on this misguided path. The language used to condemn this modern Eastern land is honestly incredibly poetic. It relies heavily on these jarring juxtapositions to spotlight spiritual emptiness. Just look at these characteristics pulled straight from the text. The people are described as superficially humble but inwardly arrogant. They have ears that are deaf, hearts that are void. And listen to this incredible contrast right here. Lives as fragile as paper, minds as lofty as the sky. The author is painting a deeply bleak picture of a society that might look civilized on the outside, but internally, it's completely desolate, with hearts like stubborn stones. It is a really forceful condemnation of modern hypocrisy. All right, let's slow things down a bit for part 4, Finding the Spiritual Way Out. Here is the philosophical solution. Now, what's really interesting about the slide is how the text finally shifts into offering solutions, but only after completely breaking down the reader's defenses with those apocalyptic warnings and harsh societal critiques. To communicate the absolute literal necessity of immediate action, the author uses 3 universally understood disasters. Number 1, don't wait for torrential rains to build an ark. 2, don't wait for the Titanic to hit an iceberg to search for life jackets. And 3, don't wait to see a bombing plane before rushing out of a building. The absolutely crucial point the author is making here is that if you wait for undeniable, visual proof of a catastrophe, you're practically guaranteeing your own destruction. Once the disaster is actually visible to the naked eye, it is already way too late. Faith and action have to come before the visible evidence. So, what's the actual game plan? What action is required? Well, the text gives advice that's kind of esoteric and abstract, so let's map it out into 3 practical philosophical milestones. Step 1, you've got to ignite the divine lamp within your heart and just completely discard conventional thinking. The text explicitly tells you do not listen to others or just run with the crowd. Step 2, abandon all possessions. You need to transcend the everyday shackles of life and death. The text actually urges you to advance at superluminal speeds, which is a wild image. And finally, step 3, ponder quietly. The author insists that you really don't need to look outward. The key to the gates of heaven, it's literally already in your hands, and you find it simply by listening to the quiet guidance of your own inner spirit. To really cement this internal spiritual journey, the author pulls out one final sweeping rhetorical move. They remind us of our place in the grand cosmic design, stating, "The vast heavens perceive your hearts. The myriad gods know your names. The sun, moon, and cosmic laws observe your deeds." By telling you that you are under constant universal observation, the text is attempting to elevate your everyday, mundane human choices to a level of absolute cosmic importance. It powerfully reinforces the central theme. Out there in the vast, endless expanse of existence, true spiritual life takes precedence over absolutely everything else. So we've explored the architecture of this fascinating text, from its urgent warnings of impending storms and the tragic transactional failures of the pirate, all the way to its deep societal critiques and esoteric solutions. Now, while the highly specific theology and that apocalyptic timeline belong entirely to the author, the underlying themes here touch on something deeply universally human. It leaves us with a truly provocative philosophical question to carry with us today.
In the face of ultimate impermanence, whether you view that as some massive cosmic event or just the natural end of a human lifespan, how do we actually balance the material world we live in with the spiritual life we cultivate? Definitely something to think about as you go about your day. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.